afternoon, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to our live virtual event with the Society of Professional Women. I'm Nicole Stevenson. I'm the director of the SPW program at the Mainline Chamber of Commerce. SPW would not be possible without the continued support of our members and most of all, our sponsors. You just saw my screen. I shared that earlier with all of our sponsors that continue to support our mission, which is to accelerate the advancement and expand the influence of women leaders of all professions and generations, strengthen our business community, and support the region's nonprofit organizations. These companies demonstrate a commitment to greater gender equity and diversity and support them whenever possible, please. So last month, we hosted our first SPW event in person in 18 months. It was addressing authentic allyship, how to be a champion in the workplace with Dr. Brandy Baldwin. It was a beautiful day with an intimate group of attendees, and just 1 week later, we broadcasted the recording from that event for a virtual experience that also included breakout rooms to encourage networking and enhance the topic through a discussion among peers. The Chamber will continue to host an array of program offerings, both in person and virtual, or both, to meet the needs of our members with safety and respect as a top priority. Our next SPW trademark event will be on Wednesday, November 17th, with the president of Delaware County Community College, Dr. Joy Gates Black. This session will focus on embracing a culture of change. Leading in times of challenge and constant change, Dr. Gates Black is striving to enhance the role that community colleges play in enhancing educational opportunities for students with the goal of addressing the skills gaps that employers are facing. This interview will explore the measures that individuals and companies can take to create a positive impact. You can visit our website at spwmainline.com to register. You can continue to help us serve you by communicating with our staff, taking our surveys, and by interacting with us on social media. You can use our hashtags, hashtag MLCC and hashtag SPWMainline. Thank you again for your continued support. There is a chat function and a Q&A function at the bottom of your screens. Please put your contact information in the chat function to connect with one another. You can save that chat at any point during the webinar by clicking the 3 little dots at the bottom of the chat and hitting save. I recommend doing that at the end of the session so you get as much information as possible. Please make sure you're putting your questions in the actual Q&A function so that we don't lose them throughout the program in the discussion. And in order to continue our efforts to connect individuals with one another through networking during today's program, we will be sending the attendee list from today to all attendees and sponsors with information on how you can identify up to 2 individuals to have a 15-minute conversation with. We will also be hosting a meeting session after the panel discussion today, and each attendee will have the opportunity to introduce themselves and their company, and a moderator will lead the proposed question from today's program through the dialogue between the group of individuals. The meeting link for the rooms will be provided in the chat function now and at the end of the formal program today. We will also send you an email with the meeting link shortly. And our team member, Pal, will stay on to help others after the event through the transition. So please be patient with us as we wait for everyone to join. So now I'd like to welcome and thank all of our esteemed panelists for being with us today and for all the preparation that they put into making this a very engaging conversation. At the start of the pandemic, the National Center for Health Statistics and the Census Bureau began surveying Americans about how the pandemic was affecting their mental health. Consistent with a Commonwealth Fund survey conducted early in the pandemic, they found out that many Americans are facing challenges accessing support. So after listening to our members and consulting with our SPW Advisory Council, we look forward to sharing with you this important content today. It's my honor to introduce our moderator for today's program at this point, Tammy Williams. Tammy is the founder and CEO of Envision to Be Well, Inc., a digital health and wellness company. Tammy is a business thought leader who loves bucking the status quo to bring knowledge to life about whatever will keep us happy and safe. She is a problem solver who drives strategy and engagement to support and foster business growth and change. Prior to starting Envision to Be Well, Tammy had an illustrious career in global education, corporate communications, customer relationship management, and human resources operations for multiple Fortune 500 companies. This experience allows her to provide thought leadership, identify critical insights, and develop optimal business strategies supported by clear, actionable recommendations for execution. Tammy received the Distinguished Award of 25 Influential Black Women in Business presented by Mobil Oil and the Network Journal, a Distinguished Leadership Award by the State Senate of Pennsylvania and Alumni Association of Lincoln University, and she is an active member of the League of Women Voters in Chester County, a leader of the Philadelphia chapter of Elevate Network, and a PA State Delegate for Vision 2020 Women 100. And she is also a program advisor for the George Washington University Customer Experience Program. That is a lot. Please welcome Tammy to introduce our panel and begin this engaging dialogue today.
Hi, thank you so much, Nicole. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate the Society of Professional Women for asking me to moderate this wonderful panel and discussion that we're having today. We have a great lineup of experts that are here to leave you with more than what you came in with. That's always the goal. So, you know, one of the things that I want to make sure of is that you know that the goal for this meeting is to provide resources, strategies, and tools to increase workplace and personal wellness. You know, they go hand in hand. You don't have one without the other. And our panel today is going to really give you some good nuggets of information, as well as talk about what they do, some, you know, both professionally, and some will be providing some information on their personal wellness journeys as well. I will be chiming in from time to time. As Nicole said, if you have any questions, please add them into the chat. Nicole will be monitoring them. And, you know, once we get to the end of this particular round and then go out into the breakout rooms, if we have time beforehand, we will get some of those questions answered. So let's jump right in and get started with this workplace wellness, managing the personal and professional landscape post-COVID. And we know that we can't even say that are we post-COVID? So many things are cropping up, and they probably will continue to crop up. So let's start with introductions of our other panelists. I'd like you to tell us about yourself and the organization that you represent, and please share a little snippet of your experience when it comes to the discussion of wellness, professionally first, and if you'd like, give us a little insight into your personal wellness journey. So let me start with Avital. She's known as Avi Spiegel, LCSW. She'll tell you what that acronym stands for. And she's with Mainline Health's Women's Intensive Outpatient Program. Avi?
Thanks, Tammy. My name is, again, it's Avital Spiegel. I go by Avi, and I do work for Mainline Health under Meermont Outpatient Services, located in Broomall. I do work exclusively with women and currently have an individual caseload as well as run an intensive outpatient program. And what that is, that's a higher level of care. So people who are struggling more in individual therapy weekly is not enough. There's an intensive outpatient level. So either you come from the bottom up kind of referral, or you can come from a higher level of care, even than intensive outpatient. So inpatient partial level, which meets 5 days a week, usually intensive outpatients 3 days a week, 3 hours a day. And, you know, it's usually when people are accessing benefits such as FMLA, short-term disability, long-term disability, so they can be covered while they can attend this programming because it's pretty extensive. We work on a lot of reflection, what you can do differently, try to slow down, be mindful, a lot of mindfulness practices, self-care, right? Really making that important. And, setting small realistic goals so that you feel prepared to return back to the workplace, return back to things that you were struggling to manage before. And a lot of the things I teach, I apply to myself. It's been very helpful. I'm a real big believer of holistic approach and mindfulness and meditation. And that's it.
Thank you so much, Avi. I'm going to move next to Zway Kwok, who is the CEO and founder of Calm Clarity. Zway?
Hi, Tammy. It's an honor to be here and have this very important discussion. So for me, I think about workplace wellness probably a little bit differently in the sense that all of us are dealing with different factors that can lead to not being well, right? That we experience different burdens, we experience different challenges and adversities in life, different histories with trauma, with violence, with danger, right? And we have different triggers, we have different baggage. So what wellness may mean for one person may mean something completely different for someone else, right? And given where we are in society and what the pandemic has uncovered, I think what's important is to think about social wellness. What does it take to be a healthy society where everybody can function and become their best selves and realize their full potential, where everyone can live in alignment with their values and pursue their aspirations and dreams? So it's not about being okay with how society is and making peace with that, but being able to harness our assets, our strengths, our talents and gifts to create a better society. So I think that's how my definition of wellness has evolved because of the pandemic.
Thank you, Zway. And let's move now to Shari Botwin, LCSW and author of Thriving After Trauma.
Hi there, Tammy. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here today. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I actually work in a private practice in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. I'm the author of Thriving After Trauma. My experience of wellness in the workplace is probably different than some of the other people here because I do work independently. One of the things that I focus on in my work with my patients and also as a therapist and advocate is trying to empower people to get what they need to be able to focus on their mental health while working, and also to join together with other therapists, especially since the pandemic. I've been working a lot to connect with therapists and try to figure out how we can also support ourselves and maintain our sanity while we're going through such difficult times. So in addition to being a therapist, I'm an advocate, and I'm also a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. So when I'm not in my office, I do a lot of writing and speaking on issues related to trauma recovery.
Thank you, Shari. And as you can see, our panel, while we all are focusing on aspects of workplace and personal wellness, we all come, at it from different points of view. And that's a good thing. I know that for me and with my company, we have a tool that provides 4 things. It's knowledge, support, access, and autonomy for whole person health. So we believe that, you having a healthy mindset, as well as, having that wellness aspect of it, you need these 10 pillars of 360-degree well-being that we focus on with our product and our solutions. So let's dive right in. And, I'm going to direct this question to Avi. How important is empathy when addressing the topic of mental health?
Good question. So I think that, like it was mentioned about how everyone experiences wellness differently, everyone also experiences their symptoms differently. So understanding that if somebody shares that they're depressed or they're sad, that could mean something completely different from one person to another. So really working on releasing judgment and just being present for what somebody has to share, and I'm working with a lot of women on being able to paint the picture of what it looks like to feel sad or depressed, whether that's sleeping too much, not sleeping enough, eating or not eating enough, overeating or not eating. So it's really important to just try to remove any judgment and just try to meet as best as you can to meet somebody where they're at.
Thank you. And I'm going to direct this next to Shari. When it comes to empathy and that topic of mental health, and the fact that you have lived through some traumatic experiences, how important would you say that empathy is when addressing it? And what about those biases that can lead and contribute to trauma?
Such a good question. And I think in terms of empathy, understanding that when you're in a relationship with other people or you're in a work environment, there will definitely be people who won't understand what you're going through. and may not be able to relate. But when I think of the word empathy, I think of trying to be able to connect not to somebody's details of their trauma, but to be able to connect to the feelings. So a big issue that comes up for so many people is the feeling of shame when it comes to acknowledging that they're struggling with any type of mental health issue. I'm working with somebody right now who is trying to transition back into work after being in an IOP like Avi was talking about. And one of the things that she was talking to me about is, how do I go back to work and deal with these questions? Where were you? Or why have you been away? Or what happened? So I think we really, as a society, need to be able to understand that even if we don't really understand what somebody is experiencing, or we can't relate to what it feels like to struggle with mental health issues, I think we can all relate to feelings that surround mental health, whether it's depression, anxiety, obsessing, eating disorders, addiction. So it's really about tapping into the feelings and not so much about the details of someone's experience.
Thank you so
Right.
much. And,
If I may jump in,
sure.
I can talk a little bit about the neuroscience of empathy. When scientists study empathy, they break it down into 3 components or 3 different neural networks. So one is the mirror neuron system, which is our ability to feel what someone else is feeling or experience what someone is experiencing like it's happening to us, right? The second is what they call the mentalizing network, where you can imagine someone's story. And like when you read fiction, it's like inhabiting their world and their perspective on life and knowing that it's different from yours and it's okay. You don't have to agree or disagree. You're just seeing that they have a story, they have a perspective, and it's an interesting one that you're curious to learn more about. The third is compassion. The networks for when they are suffering, the wish to alleviate their suffering and not to add to it, not to judge it, criticize it, make it go away, or not feel it. So there's a difference between what they call empathy fatigue, where it causes people to shut down because there's too much empathy and they can't stand the way it feels. They don't like the distress, that it's contagious sometimes. And then having this compassionate altruism, this desire to make a difference. And I think when you understand these 3 networks and how to use them, empathy can be a tool for inclusion rather than something that people see as a negative sometimes. Like sometimes people say, don't give them so much empathy. They'll just give them permission to act that way, versus empathy as a tool to create connection, to create resonance, to help people feel like they're seen and heard and that they're supported. Right. And I think that's a huge difference in this world we have now, where so many people are feeling left out. There's so many disparities. There's so much shame about how COVID has impacted us as well. How do we use empathy as a tool to open up those networks that I've just described so we can have more meaningful dialogue and connection and discussion? And one of the big things about the research on well-being is that social support connection is a huge part of our quality of life and our experience of happiness. A person's happiness is correlated to how many strong, meaningful connections that they have, how much support they get from their social network. And one of the costs of the pandemic has been the isolation that we've all experienced. And because of that isolation, we've been experiencing less empathy. Right. And I think we all need empathy to thrive and to feel whole and to feel like life is meaningful and to wake up and know that we're going to have a good day.
No, thank you for that. You know, all of these answers they resonate with all of us, I'm sure. We believe that when it comes to again, that overall well-being, 3 of those pillars that we focus on can fit in very well with what we're talking about, which is empathy with this question. And we, have 3 pillars, the one that's called kindness, and then we have one that is humanity, and the other one is relationships. Like you said, Zwei, people have been isolated. You need relationships. And we came to find out during COVID how important relationships are, how important they are to who we are for support, for our overall well-being. And I'm sure that we're going to touch on this more as we segue right into this next question, which is, let's define trauma and impact. That's a pretty, I'm going to say different people have different definitions as it relates to them, not just what, the dictionary says or what the medical community says, but what are the effects of long-term recovery and what does that look like, in your opinion, for productivity, especially as we define trauma and impact? And Zwei, I'm going to direct that to you first.
Sure. So my book, Calm Clarity, is about my journey of healing the trauma I experienced as a refugee from Vietnam and growing up in inner city Philadelphia, exposed to quite a bit of violence and negativity. And there's a wonderful book called The Body Keeps the Score, which discusses trauma. And I think about trauma as such a life or death type of experience of fear and threat and danger that it gets frozen in your body. It causes a sense of dissociation where that event will always seem to you like it just occurred yesterday. Like you'll have flashbacks, you'll have a sense of anxiety when something triggers you to that's similar to that event that you experienced, right? And it might be under the level of consciousness, but there's an increased anxiety when the trauma gets triggered or memories of that trauma come to the surface. And I'm not exactly clear what you mean by impact, but I think a lot of people don't realize how trauma has impacted their development and their brain development, right? And so what trauma will do is cause dissociation and fragmentation of your identity. So there's a part of you that might have been frozen in time, like when you experienced a trauma, when you were 2, when you were 5, when you were 10, when you were 14, and our sense of self becomes incoherent. And a lot of what the work of therapy does is help you to update your experience of that event, not from the perspective of your 4-year-old or 8-year-old self who couldn't protect you, but as your adult self now, and how you can now take action to create safety and to counteract that feeling of helplessness, right? And not being able to do something. So it's learning that, these events that took place in the past are not dangerous to us today. And what tools do we have at our disposal? What resources, what strengths do we have to create safety for us today? And I think it can be very challenging when we talk about racial trauma, because people of color, given the history of this country's past and what continues to happen, there is this fear and this helplessness of what the system could do if we could be the next victim, right? And I think that all those challenges that resurfaced during the pandemic, it leaves open this question of racial trauma, because I think that hasn't been well addressed. And many people of color, we want to have those tools. We want to be able to say we have the strength and resources now so that we're not helpless in the face of racial trauma. But the truth is we're not sure.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much, Zwei. And I want to, have Shari jump in here because, some of the traumatic experiences that you've had, I'd like you to weigh in with what you have done and what you think are the effects of long-term recovery. And how does it look even with your own life? Did what happened to you early in life actually shape you to become, a licensed clinical social worker?
So when I was around 10 years old, that's when I decided that I need to get out there in the world and be able to connect with people and speak about what happened to me and know that life was going to get better. So my journey through childhood was sort of serving as the therapist for all my friends, at times even trying to take the dysfunction in my own family and repair it. So I think one of the things that actually kept me alive, hopeful, fighting for my life was knowing that someday I will be an adult and that I can use these experiences that I've dealt with to try and make a difference. So when I think about trauma and the impact, and I think about the process of recovery, I think about not necessarily specific events that I've survived or that patients that I work with have survived, but that feeling of isolation, feeling like nobody understands, nobody cares, There's not anybody out here that's protecting me. And part of, I think, healing from that and recovering from that is being in your adult life as a parent, as a friend, as an employee, as an employer, and saying, I have a voice. There are things that I can do that can make a difference. I don't have to continue to re-experience these feelings. I know a lot of times in the workplace, what happens is those fears that we felt in childhood, fear of getting in trouble, fear of getting caught, fear of getting hurt, get triggered when we think our boss is mad at us or we're trying to figure out how to confront a colleague. So this is something that I work on with people all the time. One of the reasons I left my job and opened a practice in my mid-20s was because I was so triggered in the work environment. I couldn't deal with having bosses or colleagues. There was so much dysfunction in the place that I was working. And at that point, the PTSD that I was struggling with, it was too much to manage in a work environment. So I never went back into the work environment, but what I do is I use my earlier experiences and I try to help other people, because I feel like in some ways it's really very helpful to be working among peers and colleagues, because then you're not by yourself. There's that sense of connection. So I think when I think about, being here today and trying to help people figure out, how do I keep moving forward in my life if I've dealt with different types of traumas, or how do we as a society continue to move forward when we feel like we live in such unsettled and unsafe times? I really try to focus a lot on relationship, connection, and the idea of wellness. And when I think of that, and when I think of recovery, I think of the things that really kept me going and that continue to keep me going are knowing that I have people I can reach out to, whether it's colleagues, friends, sometimes even just connecting with parents of my little guy and knowing that I'm not crazy and what I'm feeling. Those are the things that I focus on, and those are the things that keep me going. So the idea of continuing to reach out, speak, be heard, and understand that some of these feelings that I have and that we have are related to things that already happened. They're not so much about today.
Thank you. It goes back to that social aspect of, this is the support that you need. Those relationships, they really matter. And the fact that you left the workforce in, your 20s, when you knew that you had to get out, that you called it the trigger. You were triggered enough to say, I'm going to step out. Everyone can't do that. And so they need that support if you have to kind of bear your way through it all. I want to direct this next question to Avi. You say you work with women, and the Venus and Mars and how we deal with things and how women are actually making this, this mad exodus from the workforce, just due to a number of things that have happened in COVID, whether it's enlightenment about what they were doing. And I say, I want to do something different. I want to do something that really matters, whether it's your family, your caregiver, whether it's as a sandwich generation or, your children. But it has really opened the eyes to a lot of people, in particular women. So I'd like you to address, what is the difference between acute stress and chronic stress? And what have you seen as to how women handle this?
So I think, for women, there's a lot of pressure and expectations, whether it's societal, whether it's family, over time, this need to do it all, to do it well. I always ask, especially in the group setting, I'm like, where are the capes? Where, if we were Wonder Woman and we could do it all, we'd have capes. We're only human, right? And just to really stress the idea that we are human beings, right? We can only do so much. So I think because of this past year and a half plus, there has been an increase, like you've said. I've seen a lot of women with more acute stress around just being able to cope and manage fear of the unknown, versus the chronic stress where it's been with them, and an event like this can really elevate and escalate a condition. So I think it's it's very, they come to get support for similar reasons, just really trying to figure out how to balance what needs to change, what can I do differently, really recognizing what I am doing. That's a big thing. Recognizing what I was doing wasn't working. Because what I hear often from women is that I just want to get back to myself. I just want to be who I was. And I try to help them see, you have to look at it like I need to be somebody different. It's got to be different, because even though you have the desire to get back to where you were before you were here, which I understand, what was going on there wasn't working. Slowly over time, things were not working for you. And you might have not noticed it, or maybe you did, but you brushed it off, because again, we have those pressures. We have, things we need to do. We're a mother, we're a wife, we're a daughter, we're a sister, we're an employee, all these different roles and hats that we wear. And finding balance can be so difficult, but that need to just push ourselves through and ignore, the reality that we need help.
We certainly do. We needed help, frankly, before the pandemic, before COVID. COVID just brought a lot of things right to the forefront, and we need it even more right now as we're trying to come up out of COVID. And then what does this look like? What does it look like? How do we act? How do we act, and then how do we react to different things that we come across in this new age that we're in? And Zway, I would like you to address how to tackle this increased anxiety in adults amidst all of the noise that's going on, using some of what you do when it comes to neuroscience and mindfulness.
Sure. Well, during the pandemic, I decided to create our first online course for Calm Clarity as a nonprofit program. We're offering it free to everybody, and it's called a Mind Hackers Toolkit to Calm Anxiety. It shares 10 neuroscience-based tools to soothe an anxious brain. And I would admit readily that I have an anxious brain. I was prone to panic attacks in high school and college, and it was by understanding the biological underpinnings of anxiety that I managed to get a hold or regulate these symptoms, so I don't have panic attacks anymore. And when the pandemic happened, luckily I didn't have a panic attack, but it's something that would have happened in the past. And so I think of anxiety as having three components. One is physiological, and then there's the mental, and then there is the learning how to preempt or pre-train your body for resilience, right? And so the physiological component is just realizing when you have a freeze, flight, fight reaction, the body is going to release a lot of stress hormones, and you're going to have higher levels of restless energy, right? How do you manage that restless energy? So one is understanding that anxiety evolved for a reason. It's not there to make your life miserable. Anxiety evolved because we needed this extra energy to tackle a challenge. It's our job then to understand how to channel that extra energy. And so I tell people, like, one is first you have to understand how to activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which allows you to restore blood flow that goes to your arms and limbs back to your brain. And so one way is to do deep breathing. So I recommend myself 6-3-6-3 breathing cycles. So you inhale for 6 seconds, hold for 3 seconds, exhale for 6 seconds, hold for 3 seconds, and do it at least 3 times. The count doesn't matter. Some people do box breathing, where it's 4-4-4 or 6-6-6. But as long as you take time to activate your parasympathetic system, you'll return blood flow to your head. Another one is if there's too much stress hormones, then you actually have to run it out of your system. You have to do moderate cardio to stimulate a fleeing response, so that you can then consume all that restless energy and be able to focus, right? And use some of that endorphin high you get from running to feel better. And then when it comes to the mental side, our thought process, if we ruminate, if we create negative spirals of worry, we'll end up using a lot of energy and keeping us from moving forward, because we just focus on all the negative things that attract our attention. And when you feel negative, you tend to think about negative things. That's just the way the brain works. You get caught into these spirals of negativity. And when how the brain works is when you have this left and right prefrontal cortex, the right side helps you see the negative, be realistic about what can go wrong. The left side helps you see what can go well and have hope and optimism, right? The right side makes you a little bit more pessimistic. During crisis like this, the left side tends to shut down. So we go into worst case scenario thinking. Then the question is, how do you reactivate the left side so you don't lose balance, right? So you can still see both the positive and the negative. You can still have hope for the future. When you don't feel hope, it means your hope networks have turned off. It's your job to return them on. And one way I do that is through watching comedy, right? And laughing and laughing, finding humor in a bad moment or in adversity as well. So I think it's important for you to be aware of how the mind works when you're on a negative train and how you can redirect that train so that it doesn't just go off a cliff, right? And then there's also activating, like building in stronger networks of positivity and hope. So I often recommend people do something called the compassion meditation, which involves wishing good things for yourself and other people. Like, may we all be happy, may we all be healthy, may we all be safe, or do a gratitude journal and actually try to generate and self-activate those positive feelings. Because when you do that, a biochemical cascade starts. You have elevated levels of oxytocin and DHEA, which buffers stress hormones and actually reduce the levels of stress hormone in your body. When you can do all that, you can get through very challenging times like we're in with less detriment to your health, right? So
Jay,
you can sleep
I,
better.
I have to tell you, this is all fascinating stuff. It's a lot of information. And my question is, because we're going to come back to this, in the Mind Hackers Toolkit, some of this that you just mentioned, is it addressed in this free, webinar that is and you have the Mind Hackers Toolkit? Does it include some of this that you're talking about?
Yeah, so the 10 techniques will go over what I shared in more detail. I may not really talk about the comedy part, but we talk about the 10 and befriend response and learning how to become more aware of how your mind works and how to challenge your mind to be to see how it's being negative and to dispute negative beliefs. So my hope, like, this is a free program, and one of the reasons why like this few weeks have been a little bit crazy is that we're launching a peer mentorship program to teach college students to serve as peer mentors and share this course using a facilitation guide on campus with their peers, because college is where people are experiencing really high levels of anxiety right now. And one of the things we do want to do is partner with companies who, want to serve or improve the wellness and the mental health of their teams, to also use the facilitation guide and help people understand the mechanisms of anxiety, and as a team give each other more effective social support.
That's wonderful. We'll make sure that information is provided to everyone. And I will say that one of the things that I do is, and I wear this every day. Sometimes when I'm having, and I know that a bad day is coming, and that I couldn't do the flee part because I just got over a broken foot. And so I couldn't train anymore, for something that was giving me joy, which was training for my 5th half marathon. But this is, today I will live life grand. And every day that I wake up, that is what I say. Today I will live life grand. Because think about it. If you were to say it out loud, today I will, okay, your affirmation, but I'm going to live life grand. I can't say that with my frown turned upside down. I just can't. Today I will live life grand. And grand is not about, things. It's about that inner peace. So I could go on and on about that. I'm going to move right into this next question, which I think that everyone has probably been waiting on. How would someone advocate for their mental health with an employer? And Avi, I'm going to turn over to you with this. When you go back to work or return to work, how do I react? What is it that I do say? How do I actually even return to work? And when I say return to work, because we've all been working. I used to hear, it's back to work. No, we have been working probably more than ever if you work from home, because it's harder to turn it off. But now that so many are going back into the office, what is it that someone can do to advocate for their mental health with their employers?
Part of it, you just said it, advocate, right? I really work a lot with women, especially in the IOP, the intensive outpatient, to get to a space where they feel comfortable advocating for their needs, because most likely they weren't before, right? Because like I was saying earlier, things were already happening, but they weren't able to speak up. They didn't feel they could speak up, whether it was related to past traumas, fear, all of that stuff. So what I'm seeing more happen, which I think is a wonderful thing if it allows, is that as the women I work with are winding down from their IOP, they will set up a meeting with their supervisor to kind of discuss where they're at. Again, they don't go into details about everything that happened. Sometimes the supervisor is aware, sometimes there's not. We have good laws in place for that, right? But to be able to share about expectations, boundaries, boundaries are huge. Communication, what do I need for my mental health, for my well-being? What's been working and what hasn't, right? Having a conversation. Hopefully there's somebody you trust. If it can't be a supervisor, maybe there's another colleague that you can at least try to open up to a little bit and say, hey, I could use your help. I just want to feel supported. That's what we were sharing earlier. People just want to feel heard and supported because they weren't before. They didn't feel that way. So I think it's important if you're able to speak with somebody directly, absolutely having that conversation. We all understand when somebody has an injury or, has hospitalization for some reason, and people know how to accommodate when there's a physical component. You have a broken leg, we create more space. When it's mental health, there's no visuals. Right. Yeah. So it's really trying to understand, again, going back to that empathy piece and what we've been talking about. How do I understand? How do I support somebody? It might be as simple as, hey, can I move my space? I was triggered, or, being close to the bathroom, everybody always constantly stopped to talk to me, which is nice, but I can't get my work done, right? Something so simple like that, really trying to think about ways that the transition could be a little bit easier if there's something that could change.
Yeah, it's important for people to understand, employees to have this, know that they can combat that, what we call fear sharing, to share information. I think over the last 18 months, more has been shared about our families. They talk about church and state, and then, personal and professional. You want to keep that separate. Well, you know what? During this pandemic, it was hard to do that. Very hard. How many times have you been on a Zoom call or Teams call or whatever, and your children have come in, the dog is barking, the child is crying, they're trying to get on their Zoom for school. So many things have happened that normally we wouldn't expose this to work because we feel like we've got to have this sort of perfection. We can do this. We got everything under control. And frankly, during COVID, there was a lot that was out of our control. So Zwei, what is it that employers can do? And I'm going to ask you to be pretty short on this one, but what can employers do to help employees come back into the office, not back to work, but back to the office?
Well, I think one is to send a survey and ask, what are your concerns? Like, what are the things that you're afraid of happening or challenges you have coming back? And we can't promise that we're going to address all of these concerns, but once we have a list of what are the most common concerns affecting people, maybe we can have a brainstorming exercise or discussion to see what we can do to address these concerns and issues, right? And I think that will help the employees feel like, okay, we have a chance to participate in how we come back, right? We can influence it, we have a voice. And I think that's the most important thing. Having unilateral decision-making can perpetuate a power hierarchy, right? And make people feel more helpless. But when you give people that voice, that opportunity to be part of making a difference and having the ability to advocate for themselves, like Avi's talking about, you're inviting people to provide solutions too. So you can do a survey and say, what are the challenges and what do you think are realistic and practical ways these challenges could be addressed? Right? Because we don't have huge amounts of money to throw at it, but what are realistic ways we could address it? You might get great ideas.
Absolutely. We actually have an assessment that we provide. It's called the KISA assessment, KSAA. It stands for Knowledge, Support, Access, and Autonomy. And we tie in the social determinants of health because we know that our health and wellness begins where we live, learn, work, play, worship, all of those things. And so, this KISA assessment has been working pretty well, and a lot of employers are expressing an interest in it. I know that we're getting close to the time that we're going to have our breakout sessions. So Avi and Shari, I'd like to know, what can you do? Give some recommendations of what you can do in your personal life to increase wellness. Like Shari, I'll start with you. What can I do? Where do I start?
The place that you start, I think, is you try to do an inventory of what do I need to do to take better care of myself. So doing an inventory regarding how you're eating, are you exercising, are you connecting with people? Because again, everybody has their own experience. Everybody's in a different, unique situation. So I am a strong proponent of really being able to look at ourselves and be aware of, or try to gain awareness into what may or may not be missing in our lives. I know that one of the things I've noticed over the last 18 months is that I'm doing more speaking in terms of talking about what I'm feeling, expressing my fears, my frustrations. I know that when the kids were home from school and I was having therapy sessions in one room and my little guy was up in the front trying to do math and science and be on his Zoom calls at age 9, there were times when I thought I was going to lose my mind. So I made it a point to continue to speak up and say what I was feeling, because I didn't want to feel like it was just me. And I wanted other people to tell me what they do to maintain their sanity. So I think being able to speak up and really just access your relationships. I think that the idea of being home and away from our work environments and away from our colleagues, in a way, it's forced us to pick up the phone more and be more open to speaking. I never used to use the phone. I'm not a big talker on the phone, but in the last 18 months, I've done more FaceTimes and more phone calls than probably in my whole life. So I think that being able to talk, being able to, like on a day like today, to be able to get outside. I know I love my Peloton. I did it this morning. That was my pump up for today's panel. I had my cat sitting with me, totally distracting me. I was laughing. I was just having fun. So being able to think about, what do I need to do to take good care of myself? And again, it's going to be different for everybody, and that is okay.
Absolutely. We have a saying that is, everybody is different and everybody is different, because we are. Everybody is different and everybody is different, which is why we focus on those 10 pillars of eating, finance, fitness, kindness, mental health, humanity, relationships, spirituality, work, and health. You need all of those, and they all fit into everything that we've been talking about today. I want to, we've been talking a lot about trauma, and I think in some aspect we all have trauma that come to us in different ways, and some of it we could say is more of a 9 to 10, and some would say, well, I don't really consider it to be trauma. Maybe it's something else, but I want to end this on a positive note as we get ready to go into our breakout sessions. And let's talk about, I'm going to say a couple of positive takeaways that this pandemic, COVID, has taught us. And, you can say what it has taught you personally or what it has taught you professionally. And Avi, I want to start with you.
Sure. So I think, what I've seen a lot of, and personally and professionally with the women I work with, is, that reminder that we come first, and that life is hard, right? But we should also be able to experience joy. And if that's something we're not allowing for ourselves, what do we need to do to change that? I think that oh, I lost my thought. I think so. I think it's recognizing, with the pandemic and things slowing down, a lot of people would say like, wow, I have all this time, right? I can go outside and go for walks. I can, take care of myself better. So recognizing what wasn't working before, too much on your plate, right? How do we, be conscious of that? How do we know how to ask for help? That's something I was thinking of earlier. It's so important. And we unfortunately struggle with that a lot, asking for help. There's so many ways to say no, right? So going from this really, this really packed schedule over scheduling ourselves, burning ourselves out, professionally, with family and friends, to be able, there's so many ways you can say no, and it's okay. And really allowing that for yourself. It's okay to put myself first. It's okay to say no.
That's right. Say no, mean it when you say no. So often we would say no, and the other person would say, well, their no really means yes. You got to know that no really means no, and not be afraid to ask for help. I know, in my past, I've been very afraid to ask for help because it was a sign, in my opinion, of weakness at that time. And I don't do that anymore. I can tell you that. And I definitely say no. Shari, would you leave us with, a positive takeaway that, the pandemic has taught you and that could possibly teach us? Shari, do we still have you?
I'm here. I forgot to unmute.
Okay.
I think one of the best things that has come from all this is it's really helped me to be able to make space, not to just be advocating, writing, being a therapist, but just being able to spend time with my now 10-year-old and really just be present with him. I think before the pandemic, that was hard for me. It was hard for me to separate from work. It was hard for me to know when to put the phone away or when to turn the laptop off. And I've had these moments of joy with him. And I think a little bit that he's getting older, but I think some of it's just that life has in a way slowed down. And those nights of just drinking hot chocolate and watching our shows, playing in the snow, being able to just watch movies at home with our pets, I think it's a wonderful thing. And I have promised myself that no matter how crazy and fast life gets, I'm not giving that up. I'm going to continue to do that, whether we are home or not, because for me, that's like it's the ultimate revenge to what I've been through, to be able to be a parent and to be able to feel safe and to be able to nurture and provide safety for my little guy. It's been life-changing. And I think the pandemic has really put that sort of in the forefront for me.
Thank you so much with that. And I'm sure that others can resonate with it. And Zway, I'm going to ask you to bring it home for us. I know that you must have quite a few, so let's limit it to maybe one or two of positive takeaways.
Sure. I think the pandemic caused us all to rethink what's the most important thing about life. Like, what are our priorities? What are our values? Are we living in alignment with them? If I could die tomorrow, 2 weeks from now, like if the people I love most could be taken away from me, then am I living the life that I want to live? Right. And I think people took steps to rebalance, to create more alignment with what matters, to spend time with the people they love the most. They couldn't say, maybe, we'll have next year, because sometimes you don't. And so you have to start living each day as if it might be your last. Right? Is that the type of day you want to have if it could be your last? And it might sound dark, but in some ways it's actually very liberating when you give yourself permission to do the things that really matter to you, and to say the things that really matter to you, the things that might need to be said because you might not get a second chance to say it, right? To tell people you love them, that you care about them, that you miss them. You start to let the facade drop away. You take the mask off. You stop compartmentalizing and saying, I'm going to show up as this person or that person. You're like, I'm just going to show up as me, right? Because I don't have time for this. And I think that's been very empowering for a lot of people to just own who they are, what they love, who they love.
I agree. Just staying true to ourselves, being authentic with ourselves, looking in the mirror and starting there. You know, when you treat yourself better and you start to know your body from the inside out, not just, you know, the surface, but from the inside out, your feelings. How are you feeling? Are you getting this out? Do you have that support? The relationships, how kind are you to yourself? What about humanity? During the pandemic, there was a lot of humanity. And then there was also a lot of, I'm going to say, just horrible, horrible. I can't even use the word humanity with it. So it exposed a lot of things. And, you know, this pandemic has just taught us so much. And now as we, you know, start to return back to the office, all of these things that we've been learning about ourselves over the last 18 or more months, now we got to put it into action. We got to have a plan. We got to know that we're with an employer that believes in the safety of their employees. And that also says it's not just about the top and bottom line. It is about the health and which is wealth. Okay, that's not just a cliche, of my team members, of my employees.